Hello! On this CCNA tutorial, we will tackle static routing. But first, let's define routing. Routing is used to allow communication between different networks. If your network has no router or layer 3 devices, then you are not routing. Routing packets from one network to another can be accomplished in one of two ways, through static routing and dynamic routing. In this video, we will focus on static routing. I will also introduce you to default routing. Let's start by designing our network. Let's begin by adding 3 routers to our design. Next, we add the 3 hosts. Let's arrange the devices this way. For a router-to-router connection, we'll use a serial cable. To connect the host to a router, a crossover cable needs to be used. Now let's save this network. Let's name the lab Routing Topology. Go back to the main menu, select Labs, tap the network topology we just created. So let's do the initial configuration by first setting up our device's IP address and hostname. Here are the details for our initial configuration. Please make sure you've successfully configured this part on the devices before moving on to the next phase of the video. Pause the video and configure each devices with their corresponding hostname and IP address, and resume the video after you are done. Your topology should look like this after you complete the initial setup. Now before we start configuring, I'd like for you to list down all the networks that are not directly connected per router. For example, on router 1, we have indirectly connected networks as follows: the 192.168.2.0 network, the 200.0.2.0 network, as well as the 192.168.3.0 network. Now it's your turn to do router 2 and 3. If you came up with the same list of networks, then you're on the right track. This list would be very helpful when we start to configure our static route. Make sure your list is the same as mine. Okay, let's start with router 1. First, you need to be in the global configuration mode. Type IP, then route, then our first indirectly connected network from our list, which is 192.168.2.0. with a subnet mask of /24, so that's 255.255.255.0. And lastly, we type the next hop IP address, in this case 200.0.1.2. Now configure the last 2 networks. To verify our configuration, we use the command show IP route in privilege mode. We configured 3 static routes, so the result shows the 3 routes we added in our routing table. Static routes are tagged with a capital S. They have a default administrative distance of 1. Now let's move on to router 2 and configure our 2 indirectly connected networks from our list. Let's start with the 192.168.1.0 network. It has a subnet mask of /24 and a gateway of 200.0.1.1. Then we add the second route, which is the 192.168.3.0 network, also with the /24 subnet mask. The gateway is 200.0.2.1. And that's it for router 2. We can now move on to router 3. But before we configure router 3, I think this is the best opportunity to discuss default routing. Default routes are used as a last resort destination to send packets that are not matched to other routes on our routing table. So instead of typing 3 static routes on router 3, let's configure a single line using a default route. Go to configuration mode in router 3. Let's type IP route 0.0.0.0 space 0.0 0.0, then the next hop IP address, which is 200.0 192.2.2. And that's it. We can now verify our routing table. As you notice, the route is tagged with a capital S and an asterisk. This means that we want router 3 to send packets to remote destination networks that are not in its routing table to the next hop IP address 200.0.2.2. Now remember, you can use a default route on a stub network. A stub network has only one exit to reach other networks. Essentially, we can also use a default route on router 1. Router 2 has more than one way to connect to the other networks, so a default route alone will not work. Okay, now that we're done configuring static and default routes, we can now test the host and see if they can communicate with each other. Let's tap host 0 and select the command prompt option. Let's ping host 1 by typing ping 192.168.2.11. And as you can see, it's a success. Now to test connectivity to host 2, we can ping 192.168.3.11. And that's another success. You can try pinging from the other host as well. So that's it for our static and default routing tutorial. Please don't forget to save your configurations, and thank you for watching.